The night in New York was supposed to be a triumph, a glittering comeback, a carefully staged royal revival under the unforgiving flash of Manhattan cameras. But what those cameras captured instead may have been something far more explosive, a fracture hiding in plain sight. Because according to emerging analysis of that moment, what the world witnessed was not just another glamorous red carpet appearance by Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. It may have been the instant their carefully guarded reality cracked wide open. The flashbulbs were meant to celebrate power, resilience, and the unstoppable rise of two exiled royals reclaiming the spotlight. Instead, the lights exposed something raw, something tense, something that even the most polished public relations machine could not erase. As the black SUV door opened that night in Manhattan, the atmosphere shifted before anyone even realized it. The crowd expected smiles, waves, and effortless royal confidence. What they saw first was Harry stepping out into the chaos, and his face told a different story. His jaw was clenched, his shoulders were rigid, his eyes carried a strange tension, the kind that belongs to a man bracing for impact rather than enjoying applause. Observers later described it as the silence before a storm. A prince who once laughed easily with the world now seemed locked behind an invisible wall of pressure. And then Meghan appeared beside him, radiant, smiling, perfectly poised. Her expression was the textbook definition of media perfection, polished, bright, rehearsed. But the contrast between them was impossible to ignore. One looked like a performer delivering a flawless scene. The other looked like a man struggling to stay inside the script. That invisible gap between them hung in the air like static electricity. And then something happened that shattered the illusion completely. From somewhere within the crowd, a voice cut through the flashing lights and chaos with startling force, "Stop exploiting our children." The shout froze the moment like a sudden lightning strike. For a split second, the carefully choreographed spectacle collapsed. Harry's head snapped toward the voice. Witnesses say his face flashed with something raw, anger, maybe panic, maybe both. He turned away almost instantly, but the cameras had already captured the reaction. And then came the gesture that has since fueled endless speculation. Harry reached for Meghan's arm, not gently, not casually. It was quick, tight, urgent, the grip of someone trying to escape the spotlight rather than bask in it. His lips moved as he spoke to her, but the roar of cameras drowned out whatever he said. The fairy tale image remained frozen in photographs, yet something underneath it had clearly broken. According to insiders familiar with the couple's world, that brief red carpet moment was not an isolated slip. It was merely the visible tremor of a deeper earthquake already shaking their private life. Behind the closed gates of their Montecito estate, whispers suggest the dynamic between them had already begun to change months earlier. The warmth that once defined their partnership had reportedly cooled into something more strategic, more professional, almost mechanical. One security source who witnessed their arrival in New York described the atmosphere inside the vehicle as frosty. Harry reportedly sat silent, staring forward with what the source called an ice-cold expression, while Meghan adjusted her earrings and studied her reflection in the dark window. No conversation, no shared glance, just two individuals traveling side by side through a quiet chamber of unspoken tension. When the doors opened and the cameras erupted, they stepped out not as a united couple, but as two separate worlds forced to collide on stage. Even more intriguing were earlier accounts of subtle moments that hinted at the same chilling shift. At a private dinner weeks before the gala, a witness claimed Meghan reached for Harry's hand beneath the table, a simple gesture meant to signal unity. According to the account, Harry quietly pulled his hand away and muttered something short and pointed. The moment passed unnoticed by most guests, but for the few who saw it, it felt like the instant something fundamental vanished from their chemistry. After that, everything reportedly became choreography. Experts studying the footage noticed something even stranger. Meghan's laughter sometimes arrived half a second late, like an echo that didn't quite match the rhythm of the moment. The chemistry felt out of sync, two performers sharing a scene they no longer fully believed in. And suddenly, the question surrounding that night was no longer whether something was wrong. The real question became far darker. What exactly had broken them? Because according to whispers circulating among royal watchers and insiders alike, the roots of that fracture may stretch far beyond New York, all the way back to a moment in Paris tied to one of the most painful chapters in Harry's life and the haunting legacy of Princess Diana. What happened in New York that night did not begin on that sidewalk under the harsh Manhattan lights. According to whispers that have circulated among insiders, the crack that finally surfaced in front of those cameras may have started months earlier in a city that carries a far deeper emotional weight for Prince Harry. To understand why why that moment on the red carpet felt so explosive, some observers point to a haunting setting thousands of miles away, the streets of Paris, a place forever tied to the tragic memory of Princess Diana. For most people, Paris is a city of romance and glittering lights, but for Harry, it has always been something darker, a place that echoes with the worst night of his childhood. When he returned there for a high-profile appearance alongside Meghan Markle, the world saw a glamorous couple walking a red carpet, dressed impeccably, smiling beneath the gaze of a global audience that believed they were witnessing yet another carefully staged chapter of resilience. Tabloids described the moment as a reset, a bold return, proof that the couple had regained control of their narrative. Every detail seemed precise: Meghan's shimmering gown, the poised waves to the crowd, the choreography of their arrival. But some who watched closely noticed something that felt off even then. Meghan moved with effortless confidence, greeting the cameras with perfect timing, while Harry's expression appeared tight, almost strained, as if he were forcing himself through a moment that carried a weight few others could understand. The location itself carried ghosts for him. Paris was not just another glamorous stop on a publicity tour. It was the city where his mother died in a car crash inside the Pont de l'Alma tunnel while being chased by photographers. That memory is not simply historical for him, it is a wound tied to the very reason he has often spoken about mistrusting the media spotlight. And according to sources close to the situation, it was during this Paris trip that something deeply personal allegedly happened behind the scenes. The claim circulating among insiders is that footage connected to Meghan's creative projects was filmed in or near the very tunnel where Diana lost her life. For some observers, the footage might have appeared symbolic or reflective, perhaps even intended as a tribute. But according to people who claim to understand Harry's reaction, the idea of turning that sacred place of trauma into content was something he found almost impossible to accept. The tunnel is not just a location in his memory, it is a symbol of loss, grief, and a moment that shaped his entire life. When reports of that filming reached him, insiders say his response was not explosive in public but devastating in private. It was not a shouting match that shattered the relationship, they say. Instead, it was a quiet emotional rupture, the kind that changes how two people see each other forever. After that Paris trip, those who interacted with the couple reportedly began noticing subtle but unmistakable changes in Harry's behavior. The warmth that once defined his public appearances seemed to fade. Friends described him as more distant, more withdrawn, as though he were slowly retreating behind an invisible wall. In meetings connected to their ventures and philanthropic projects, he was said to speak less frequently, sometimes sitting silently while Meghan led discussions and made decisions. To an outside observer, it might have looked like a supportive husband stepping back to let his partner shine. But some insiders interpreted it differently. They described it as a quiet form of disengagement, a man stepping away emotionally from a conflict he could no longer resolve. Psychologists often describe this stage as one of the most dangerous points in a relationship's decline, because anger can still mean people care enough to fight, but detachment signals something more final, the moment when someone begins to withdraw completely in order to protect themselves from deeper hurt. Over time, the pattern reportedly extended into public appearances as well. Harry would arrive, fulfill his responsibilities, and leave quickly, avoiding prolonged conversations or extended interactions. Meghan, meanwhile, appeared increasingly comfortable commanding the spotlight, delivering speeches, greeting supporters, and pushing forward with the projects that defined their brand. To some observers, it looked like ambition meeting exhaustion. To others, it looked like two partners slowly drifting into separate orbits while still standing on the same stage. And that brings the story back to that uneasy night in New York. When the cameras caught Harry's rigid posture, the hurried grip on Meghan's arm, the flash of anger at the voice shouting from the crowd, those moments suddenly seemed less like isolated tension and more like the visible surface of something that had been building for months. The red carpet did not create the fracture, it simply exposed it. And the deeper reality whispered by those who have watched the couple closely is that the issue may never have been a single argument or mistake. Instead, it may be the realization that the dreams driving them forward were no longer aligned. Harry, the prince who once walked behind his mother's coffin beneath the glare of global cameras, has often spoken about wanting peace and privacy above everything else. Meghan, the actress who fought for recognition and built a powerful global platform, has always moved toward opportunity and momentum. Those two forces once merged into a powerful shared story of rebellion and reinvention. But if the rumors are true, somewhere along the way the paths began to diverge. By the time they stepped onto that New York sidewalk, the smiles, the eye contact, the synchronized movements may have been less about romance and more about maintaining the narrative that the world expected to see. And that is perhaps the most haunting possibility of all. Relationships rarely collapse with dramatic explosions the way way movies portray them. More often, they fade quietly, until one day the world simply realizes two people who once stood inseparable are no longer moving in the same direction. If that moment ever comes for Harry and Meghan, it likely will not arrive with a loud announcement or a shocking confrontation. It may appear the way so many other clues already have in small gestures, silent pauses, distant glances, and the strange tension that sometimes flickers beneath the surface of even the brightest spotlight. And if that is the truth, then the night in New York may not have been the end of anything at all. It may simply have been the first time the world noticed the silence growing between the flashbulbs and the fairy tale.